Hey, I'm Mr. Terry, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, we're back with our friend, the Fat Electrician. His new video is called World War II's Most Gangster Naval Brawl. USS Borie rams German U-boat 405. Our original video is down below. Please support him. By the way, pick up some of his merch. I just bought some new stuff from him. He didn't just give it to me. I bought it. I supported him too. And you should too. All right, let's get started. By the way, I don't think I've ever felt as American as I do right now with this gear. Holy crap.
This is easily the most Pirates of the Caribbean-esque naval battle of World War II.
Sick.
Today we're talking about the USS Borie, a Clemson-class destroyer, and its extremely young captain, Charles Hutchins, and in particular that time that they decided it was a good idea to ram into a German U-boat at 2 a.m. in pitch black in the Atlantic Ocean during a storm and proceeded to get into what amounts to a naval cage fight. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by World of Warships, the first and probably only video game that I'm ever going to be a character in.
Oh, we're in the same design.
General quarters.
Yeah, for Veterans Day, you can unlock a new ship, the DD-214, and you can get me and my friend Matt from Demolition Ranch both as commanders for your ships. If you don't know, World of Warships is a free game on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox where you get to command some of the greatest naval vessels of all time, like the USS Texas, the USS Iowa, or the USS Enterprise. Or if you're into losing, you could be some of the world's
special
biggest
bonuses,
coral reefs, like the Yamato or the
quack
Bismarck.
bonus.
Seriously though, go check it out. I'm gonna have it linked down below, and when you use the code VETS4VETS, you're automatically gonna unlock me and Demo Matt, as well as a Tier 4 battleship and a bunch of in-game money. And
who's better though, Nick or Matt in it?
Premium play. So yeah, let
who's
me
got
know
the better
how bad me and
general?
Matt are at voice acting in the comments down below. Let's get back to the video.
Oh,
all right,
cool.
Our story begins with Charles Hutchins. He graduated the U.S. Naval Academy in 1936. From there, he served on the battleship USS Nevada for approximately 2 years.
You said 36?
1936. From there, he served on the battleship USS Nevada.
So we're talking before the war starts, okay? A few years before. So not just some draftee, somebody that went in.
For approximately 2 years before transferring to a destroyer. He served there for a short time, and then he ended up resigning his commission, going back home, getting a wife, having a family, starting a career, and he was just out of the military. Fast forward a couple of years after that, the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, World War II kicks off, and he ends up rejoining the United States Navy in 1941. Now, to be completely intellectually honest, I was—
By the way, I actually don't know. If you had served like he did, and then he got out, you know, got discharged or whatever, can you be drafted? I assume you can. There's not like some rule if you were enlisted and then you get out and they you know, can bring you back in like by law. Is that true? I mean, I don't know.
To find the actual context of why he decided to join. I'm not sure if he was motivated by Pearl Harbor and rejoined because of that. I'm not sure if he was concerned that he was going to get drafted, so he might as well rejoin on his own terms.
Okay, so you can be redrafted. I figured you could.
That he had to go back into the United States military. However, for the purposes of storytelling, I'm going to go ahead and assume that it was a veteran getting called back into duty because somebody needed an ass whooping.
Curse you for breathing, you slut, you idiot!
Obviously, you'd like some experienced people in it, you know what I mean?
1941, he gets recommissioned and put in command of the USS Borie, which is a Clemson-class destroyer that's been in service since 1920. So obviously not a super new ship. In addition to that, the Clemson-class destroyers had a well-known flaw where they did not have a very tight turn radius. And while that's probably not good for any ship, it's definitely not good for your destroyers because they're supposed to be the smaller, more nimble ships that were going to be used to launch torpedoes, launch depth charges, and fight off submarines. Because of this, a lot of the Clemson-class destroyers, including the USS Borie, never actually made it into the Pacific theater. Instead, they were sent over to the Atlantic, primarily being used to defend supply convoys from German U-boats. So for the first couple of years, that's primarily what the USS Borie is doing. They spend some time down in the Caribbean.
Dangerous,
though. They go down towards Brazil. They're over by Morocco, just defending supply convoys, moving items from here to there. Then,
yeah, you might be like, what? South America? A lot of supply chains coming from there. A lot of Europe gets a lot of their food imports from like a Brazil or an Argentina. Resource-wise, those places are very rich. And again, big European powers have used that. So name of the game is stopping their logistics.
Then in 1943, they go on a convoy down to Casablanca, and once they get there, they're informed, change of plans, you're no longer just running defense for these supply convoys anymore. Now, the reason for this is there's been a new invention called the High-Frequency Direction Finder, or the HFDUF. And this thing does exactly what the name says it does. It intercepts radio signals and then tells you what direction they're coming from. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's actually a humongous deal because in 1943, at this point, the Germans are still under the impression that the Allied forces have not cracked the Enigma code, which means that they're just blasting high-frequency radio waves all the time because they don't care if those radio waves get intercepted, because until now, you could never tell which direction they were coming from, and if you didn't have the ability to decrypt their message,
there's the machine. That's they use for the coding Enigma machine. If you guys have learned about Alan Turing over in England, spent forever and his crew trying to crack that thing. Intercepting logistics is such an important part of wars of all time, just knowing what their battle plans are. And you have these new technologies and things that can help you, decrypt and keep your things secret. And everybody uses them. The Japanese had theirs with magic. And then they had, the Enigma with Germany. The United States had their own. If you heard about like the Navajo code talkers, which was maybe the best out of all of them, because they would use Navajo, Native Americans, and their language, which is so only a few people can really, that know it. You can use that language. Use that language to be able to communicate in code, and that was really cool. The code talkers, really, really cool. But yeah, that kind of part of the war, I think I do find fascinating. That kind of the info battle.
There was no point to not just blast radio waves whenever you wanted. So now, rather than having a bunch of ships go out and escort supply convoys playing defense, they're going to send out what's known as a hunter-killer group to hunt down the enemy submarines and destroy them. Okay, we're going from self-defense to self-offense. It's going to be way better. So the way this works is you're going to assemble a hunter-killer group called a task force. That's typically going to be an escort carrier, which is just a smaller aircraft carrier, and then 2, 3, 4 destroyers. They go out, they track down an enemy submarine, destroyers drop the depth charges, that brings the submarine to the surface, escort carrier sends up the planes, they destroy the sub. So because of this, the USS Borie is going to go and get refitted with some more equipment. Now it already has 4 4-inch guns, torpedoes, depth charges, and some 30 caliber machine guns. But in addition to that, it's going to get some better depth charge equipment, and then it's going to get 2 20mm anti-aircraft guns.
Gosh.
In case the Germans decide they want to surface their submarine and try to man their deck gun.
Right.
Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that should that situation arise, that submarine hatch has now functionally been turned into one big game of whack-a-German, and the mallet is 2 20mm fucking machine guns.
I love this game.
Name the movie. It's kind of been a stain because it is strange of Jim Carrey's career. That's Cable Guy. I actually like that movie. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I don't know, strangely. Okay, but this sounds interesting here. Okay, we're setting up for quite a battle. German U-boats, man, were no joke. It was one thing the Germans were so good at. Remember, they were very innovative in the whole submarine technology, really cutting edge, going back to like World War I, when it was their answer to the really power and extensiveness of the British Navy. The British Navy, historically was like the king of naval history. And to be able to kind of compete with that submarine technology, Germans were really cutting edge on that. And they were fearsome. They would go in those wolf packs, as they were called. And they were, very difficult to deal with.
They get all that, then they get the Huff Duff installed, and then they get attached to Hunter Killer Group 2114, which is being led by the escort carrier, the USS Card. So they go out and they start hunting down German submarines. You have to realize this is one of the first Hunter Killer groups that the Americans have ever used, meaning the Germans don't really know what hit them. And because of that, they absolutely wreck house. On their first couple of missions, they for sure sink 4 submarines. They have 3 more probables, and then a ton of damaged submarines as well.
By the way, you might be like, how do you attack submarines and all that stuff? Well, submarines do have to surface, and you got to be ready for it, because again, it is like whack-a-mole. You got to be quick, you got to be ready for it, but also if you don't take them out, remember they're offensive. That's their design, is to get up and get ready quickly and to take out a ship, and they were notorious for it. So yeah, it's not easy, I'll tell you that.
Because of this, the task force ends up getting awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, which, if you don't know, is the equivalent to the Medal of Honor, except for a military unit. Now, out of those 4 that were sunk, one of them was sunk by the USS Borie utilizing torpedoes. And what happened was the Germans got out of the U-boat, they got into the—
How many of those were given out in World War II?
Firing these
Let me know down below.
clusters up in the air, and the Americans just kind of figured like, oh, they're still surrendering. They want us to see them, know where they're at. So they go out and they're attempting to rescue these Germans. And what had actually happened was they were utilizing these star clusters to signal where they were to another submarine.
It's a trap.
That German submarine ended up firing a bunch of torpedoes at the USS Borie.
Oh,
luckily,
boo.
they missed, and they still were able to recover all of the German sailors. After rescuing those Germans—
if you have something like that where you make your enemy think that you are surrendering, whether you were going to or not, and that was your actual intention, if you go against that, they are not going to go easy on you, man. That's like unwritten rules. You don't do that kind of thing. And now you're totally like, all the rules of counterattacking or whatever are gone now. You've lost any type of a claim to the good behavior that is supposed to come with unwritten rules of war.
They have to take them back to a port, and to get there, they have to sail through a hurricane, which they said was absolutely horrifying, drop off the Germans, then they go out again on their 4th war patrol, and that's where shit really gets out of hand. So they go out on their 4th war patrol, they're looking for enemy subs. The first time they make contact with one is actually on October 31st, 1943, aka Halloween. Everything goes according to plan. The destroyers drop the depth charges, the enemy submarines
fight on Halloween,
except there's actually 2 of them this time. And
you trick or treat to the other ships.
Bigger than the other one. This is a milk cow submarine, which is just a larger German U-boat that has a bunch of other supplies, ammunition, food, and fuel, and all the other smaller submarines stop and get resupplied by this large submarine. So if they can take out this big submarine, it's a huge deal, because not only does it hamper that submarine individually, but it messes up the entire area.
It's like those planes that you can refuel with in midair.
So the USS sends the planes up in the air, they start attacking the submarines, they end up sinking the smaller sub, which was U-boat 584, but the larger U-boat, U-boat 91, actually ends up submerging and trying to make a getaway. Now the problem is that U-boat 91 is fleeing away from all of the shipping lanes, which is kind of where the task force is still trying to remain in that area, because that's where all the supply ships are. And the U-boat knows that, and it knows that if it goes out
away from their mission
ocean where there's not going to be any ships that it can attack, the Americans are probably going to decide to stay and guard that shipping lane instead of chasing it into the open water. Which is
like it's you're better off protecting those shipping lanes, guys. Supply in war is it's not an option to fail. You can't do that. You've got precious stuff out there. It's part of those logistics of war. People love to talk about, okay, what was the fighting like, you know, on the ground and all that stuff, but just logistics. We already talked about, you know, codes and how you could communicate and have to do that secretly, but just like supply chains. Remember, this is the thing that the United States was supposed to bring to the table that nobody in the world could bring, which is this unlimited supply of resources. As the war continued on, Germany is running out of it. The British are running low. Of course, the Japanese, it's like the Americans have that coming, but what good is it if you can't protect those lanes? The Battle of Atlantic has to be won before the battle in Europe.
On the Germans' part, because they're partially right, but also America's petty. You fucked with our boats, prepare to die. USS Card Arnold J. Isbell, the man in charge of the entire task force, radios over to the USS Borie and basically says, go get them, we'll guard the shipping lanes. Immediately upon hearing this, Commander Hutchins of the USS Borie gets on the loudspeakers and informs his men, and I quote, "Gentlemen, we've been volunteered to go get that U-boat," and they all start cheering. Okay, the guys are motivated.
They've been volunteered.
Citation. They've been kicking the Germans' ass the entire time ever since they went on the offensive, and now they're going to go get these guys all by themselves. So the USS Borie breaks out of the formation, goes off chasing this submarine on its own, but the submarine's got a big head start, so it takes them a while to track it back down using the Huff Duff. They think they found it, they drop the depth charges. Sure enough, a submarine surfaces. But this one's smaller, definitely not U-boat 91, but it's still, hey, it's a U-boat, U-boat 256. We're going to go ahead and take it out. The submarine submerges again real quick, so they drop more depth charges, and then they hear a huge explosion underwater, and they just see a ton of oil all over the top of the ocean. They take that as we definitely just sunk that U-boat, so they radio back to the task force, hey, we just took one out, we're going to find U-boat 91 next, we're going to keep looking for it. Worth noting, U-boat 256 wasn't actually sunk, it did manage to limp back to port, it was just critically damaged, but the guys think they've sunk a U-boat, so they're pretty pumped. So they take off, going in that same general direction, trying to pick up something on the Huff Duff that they can track down. After about an hour, they actually get a hit. It's way off in the distance, the max range on the Huff Duff. They head that way, they start chasing it down. The sun goes down, it's nighttime, they're staying up, doesn't matter. They keep headed towards this signal. By the time they reach it, it's 2 in the morning and it is pitch black outside with 15-foot waves on a very rough ocean. And between being
this is stuff where it gets wild. We have so much modern technology. It's like no different fighting in night than in day. And I know they got radar, sonar, all those things, but like the idea of finding stuff like in night like that is just so incredibly difficult, and I would think you'd have to have a lot of luck on your hands.
Pitch black outside in the 15-foot waves, it's definitely not the time.
Yeah, and your orientation being so messed up when you're like even minor waves, man. I know these are big ships and they can counter a lot of the waves, but yeah, this sounds crazy. Let's see. I mean, they're gonna get lucky, I hope, here.
Warfare. However, if we don't touch their boat first, they're gonna touch ours. So
right.
Do not touch these. There's no touching this.
So they get to where they think they're right on top
Night of the
of
Museum is a
sub,
good
and they go
movie.
to dump some depth charges, but the equipment malfunctions, and it dumps every depth charge they have loaded.
Oh, God.
The men on board said that the explosion was so large
Well.
that it lifted the entire stern out of the water. Okay, just so we're on the same page,
Didn't
this
damage,
is a
though?
1,300-ton warship.
Yeah,
Okay?
right.
That's like 2.4 million pounds, and part of it just got lifted out of the water by this big-ass fucking explosion. So obviously,
Had to have messed up the
destroyer
sub.
damn near took flight. The submarine is damaged, and they had to
Yeah.
surface, and they're like 400 yards away from the Borie. Remember, it's 2 a.m. and there's 15-foot waves, so it takes them a minute to actually spot the sub with the
Right.
spotlight. And by the
They're
time
probably
they see it, the Germans are already on top of
surrendering.
the sub, manning
Yeah.
all the guns. So the Borie
Oh.
opens fire with the 4-inch
Not
guns.
just white flagging
and
it?
it's hitting the submarine. The submarine returns fire, and after a couple seconds of exchanging, all the Germans on top of the sub are dead, and they've disabled the main gun. From here, the Borie starts closing in on it, and
Okay,
the
now
German
what?
commander realizes he doesn't have any other option but to try to do a U-turn, because he knows that subs turn significantly sharper than American destroyers, and turn around and be able to get behind the destroyer to hit it
nimble.
with torpedoes to be able to kill
Yeah.
off the USS Borie. And
Right.
Commander Hutchins
You got
realizes
about one
the
shot at
exact
this,
same
though.
thing, which means there's only one thing to do. As the U-boat is turning at a sharper angle, the USS Borie is going to have to intercept it, ram it, and cut it in half.
Yeah. Okay.
So
This
Commander-
totally makes sense. So they're trying to get around to the side of it, but like in naval warfare, you don't want to expose your side of your ship if you can, because it's such a large angle, and they don't have, they don't have a chance to like mess up on this. And again, if the submarine can get behind you, and I assume it still has torpedoes, like if it gets behind you, you're done. So, okay, this is great. This is starting now to remind me of like Greek warfare with triremes, where, yeah, you try to get perpendicular with the ships and you batter them. That's what you do. So, yep, this is Battle of Salamis.
Commander Hutchins gives the order over the loudspeakers. They pick up as much speed as possible to ram.
A question I have, and help me out with this, you guys. Are these battleships equipped to do something like that? I can't imagine it's like a priority, like one of their, first things that they go to for options, but are they built with ramming power? I honestly don't know. Is the front like reinforced to be able to do that if you need to without totally ruining your ship? Let me know down below.
This submarine as they continue firing on it as they close in closer and closer on a collision course with this sub. The USS Borie ends up colliding with this submarine, U-boat 405, at
Pretty
a
fast.
30-degree angle, but because of the 15-foot waves,
Okay, it's not
when they
45,
collided,
but-
the USS Borie was higher than the submarine was.
So,
and
like,
it didn't cut through it.
land on it?
Landed on top of it.
Belly
so
flop.
The USS Borie is essentially high-centered on U-boat 405, and U-boat 405 is so critically damaged that it can't submerge
Probably.
anymore. So they are
Bend it
essentially
in half.
stuck on top of one another in the pitch black of night at 2 a.m. with nothing but spotlights
Ships are
riding out
humping.
15-foot waves together.
I beg your pardon, madam, but get off!
Which is horrible for the USS Borie, because now none of the guns on the deck can aim low enough to actually
Right.
hit the sub, because it's literally
What are you gonna do, board the
underneath
ship?
boat. And while U-boat 405's main gun has been disabled, which is good news for the Americans, it still has 6 anti-aircraft flak cannons on top, which
Yeah,
are
but
gonna
who's
do
gonna
some
get out
damage
on
at
that, though?
point blank range. So at this point, all the sailors on the USS Borie are like, fuck, we need guns. Some of them go to get guns. They got shotguns.
Literally,
and
go get your
Thompsons on
rifles,
board.
yeah.
In the meantime, the rest of the sailors just start throwing everything not bolted down at the Germans as they're trying to come out of this submarine to man the
They're
guns.
throwing like cans of stuff and they're like their chairs and all that as they get there. Cause yeah, you just have to do anything to not let them get to those guns. I was really hoping though somebody would jump off and they'd like board the ship pirate style. Another thing they used to do with the trireme battles, like in ancient Greece and Rome, was you would ram the ship. Then if it wasn't going to sink immediately, you went on the ship and you got like hand-to-hand battle. It was pretty intense that way.
And what happens next is going to come directly from the declassified after-action report, and I quote,
What we got?
"One man was killed by a knife thrown from Borie's deck, and which buried itself in the
throwing
man's
knife.
stomach.
What a
Another
shot.
was knocked overboard by an empty 4-inch shell casing thrown by the gun captain of gun number 2, which he could not bear." Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Shell casing kill, probably pretty rare. Getting
Yes.
a knife kill on a dude inside of a fucking submarine,
Yeah.
probably the only time it's ever happened in human history.
Yeah. I think they just unlocked some kind of achievement like you do on your Xbox. They just got it, but for like the military IRL achievement, they just went platinum for that one.
I saw that. Brick killed a guy.
I
Did
love
you throw a
Anchorman.
trident? Yeah.
For a couple of
Top
minutes, it just
5
turns
funny
into a complete
movies ever,
shit show.
maybe?
The Germans are shooting at the Americans with flare guns.
What's
while
your
the
top
Americans
5?
are throwing random shit at the Germans,
Share
trying
with
to
me.
make sure they don't make it to the flat cannons. But then the other Americans finally show back up with the shotguns and the Tommy guns, at which point the Americans are just farming the Germans for XP. I mean, they've got one spawn point with one hole they have to crawl through. They've got no shot. Regardless, the Germans still continue to try to make their way over to the flat cannons, but get mowed down almost every time. A couple of them actually do make it to the flat cannons and open fire, but they don't last very long. And while that's going on, you've got a bunch of dudes with crowbars trying to pry the ship off of U-boat 405 so they can break free. And those guys aren't aware of it at the time, but below deck, the USS Borie is critically damaged and taking on water, and the damage control crew down below is in full swing, doing everything they can to keep the pumps running, to keep water out of the ship, and to keep the engines going so they can reverse away from U-boat 405. And while all of this insanity is going on, Commander Hutchins still has the wherewithal and the knowledge and the understanding of the men that fight wars to get over the loudspeakers and yell,
"What?
Do not board the enemy vessel," which was 1,000%.
I was hoping it would be the opposite. I wanted him to do it. I want to be like everybody on board. So the sailors actually wanted to get there. They were like, "Dude, I'm ready for this." They got their knife in their mouth. They're gonna swing off some rope. Oh my god, I want it.
That's gonna happen if he didn't tell them not to.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
After 10 long, crazy minutes of what amounts to a pirate fight, they finally managed to break free.
Throw a
from
grenade
U-boat
down there or
405,
something,
and by
right?
this time, the damage control guys down below deck are literally up to their elbows in water, and the pumps are not keeping up. So at this point, the USS Borie, critically damaged, taken on water, can only move at a reduced speed. Same thing with U-boat 405, critically damaged, only able to move at a reduced speed, and it's missing half or more of its crew. And at this point, you're thinking like, okay, maybe both of them should just call it a day. But no, the second U-boat 405 breaks free, they immediately start maneuvering to get around and get that angle they need to fire torpedoes at the USS Borie.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
And Commander Hutchins isn't going to be able to do shit about it. He's got worse maneuverability, and
by the way, he's been getting so good at adding funny extra clips like that. It just I don't know, brings it to another level. I really like it.
Slower than this U-boat. There's literally isn't going to be able to do shit about it. He's got worse maneuverability and he's moving slower than this U-boat. There's literally nothing he can do. So thinking fast, he orders everybody to kill all the lights on top of the ship. And submarines don't have spotlights, so now nobody can see anything. It is just black, right in 15-foot waves. So U-boat 405 does
appreciate how good his room is getting.
It's going to cut and run.
Studio.
At which point, Commander Hutchins in the USS Borie has the same opportunity. Do I want to call this a day and limp this home, or do I want to try to finish it? We're electing to finish it, okay? This is like two heavyweight fighters in the 5th round, completely gassed, throwing punches at each other that don't actually hurt, but God.
By the way, I'm filming this the day after the Tyson Jake Paul fight. How lame was that fight? Oh my gosh, that was boring. Good thing that wasn't pay-per-view. The fights before that, the 3 before that were really good though. What did you think about the fight?
God damn it, we're in a fight. 5th round, completely gassed, throwing punches at each other that don't actually hurt, but god damn it, we're in a fight. So obviously U-boat 405 is sending out radio signals. They need help, they need backup, they need somebody to come save them, and they don't know that the USS Borie has the Huff Duff and can use that to see where they are in the dead of night with no light. So the USS Borie, under the cover of darkness, maneuvers to where they're going to be able to engage the submarine, and they light it up. They hit it with depth charges, they start firing on it with the 4-inch guns, then they hit it with the spotlight, and after a couple minutes, a bunch of the crew comes out waving hands. They're ready to surrender. They're shining the spotlight on them as the 15 surviving crew members get inside some rafts. The rafts start drifting towards the ship as the submarine explodes and sinks to the ocean floor.
Ignorant question here about what do you do when people surrender like that? Like, what's protocol? So what, you bring them on your boat? Is there like a part of the boat that can be like a jail where you can like actually lock them up so they can't like mutiny and try to like retake it? And then don't you usually do something with the vessel that they're, if you can, the one that they're leaving? Sometimes you like to like tow it essentially. But first and foremost, what's kind of the protocol? Like, so you get those guys and then like, where do you put them? Just like logistically like that. Let me know down below.
This may or may not have been due to scuttling charges that the German men set right before they got out of the ship, but regardless, everybody on the USS Borie is cheering at this point because they haven't lost a single man. As these rafts start getting closer and closer to the USS Borie, the Germans start shooting up star clusters, at which point Commander Hutchins is like, oh shit, I've seen this before. And as soon as he thinks
that movie called
himself,
again?
one of his men screams, torpedo incoming, because they spotted it in the water. He orders the USS Borie to bank as hard and as tight as it possibly can to avoid this torpedo, which it luckily does. Unfortunately, this evasive maneuver forced them to actually drive right in between the two life rafts, splitting them apart, which may or may not have capsized the rafts and killed them. We have no idea, and the USS Borie wasn't sticking around to find out because there's a sub out there shooting torpedoes at them. The USS Borie takes off doing a zigzag pattern, trying to evade this submarine. Hopefully that sub is going to stop chasing them and go rescue their guys. And below deck, things are not looking good for the USS Borie because at this point, Lieutenant Morrison R. Brown, the engineering officer, is standing in water up to his neck trying to keep the ship afloat after ordering all of the other men above deck. And
by the way, I've said this before, of all the things you could be assigned to in the military, the last one for me would be a submarine. I'm already kind of claustrophobic. I am afraid of the ocean. I think the ocean is scary and humans should not be going down under it. Put me about anywhere else than that, than just a floating coffin.
And he continued to do this until there was literally no room left for him to breathe inside of the engine room.
What place would you never want to be assigned to?
Other members of the damage control crew would also receive the Naval Cross and Silver Stars. At this point, the USS Borie is somehow still managing to barely limp along moving forward, but they've lost all auxiliary power. The pumps below aren't keeping up, and this ship is absolutely going down. Commander Hutchins, just trying to buy time, orders all of his men to start throwing over any extra weight they can find. By this point, it's daylight, which is honestly worse because that means that the enemy submarines are going to be able to see him. In addition to that, the generator for the emergency radio and the homing beacon isn't working, so they're not going to be able to radio for help. So the communications officer does the most MacGyver shit I've ever heard of in my life.
I love this kind of stuff.
Get the emergency radio generator running with the alcohol-based fuel from a torpedo, aka torpedo juice, and Zippo lighter fluid. Shortly after that time, they're able to send the radio message out to the task force. The USS
you gotta have engineers, you gotta have chemists, man.
Once the planes actually spot them, okay, that's good. Now they just have to keep the boat floating long enough for the task force to make it to them.
Keep pumping the water out.
They do everything to keep the ship afloat while they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and hours go by, and it's noon, it's 1, it's 2, it's 3, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun's starting to go down, and finally Commander Hutchins has to make the call, because if he has to abandon ship in the middle of the night, it's going to be a catastrophe because they don't have any power for lights anymore, and nobody's going to be able to see shit. So he has to decide if he thinks this boat can stay up all night long, or he needs to get his men in the life rafts right now. So he makes the call. He orders all of his men to abandon ship and get in the life rafts, and they are in those life rafts all night long. During that time, 27 men die from hypothermia and injuries from the previous day's fight. The next morning, the task force does show up. The rest of the men,
and you know that it must have been really bad for them to get out of the big ship, right? Because I know that's such a big threat. It must have been bad. It must have been like almost totally gone. So, another reason I don't want to be out in the ocean.
And the USS Borie stays fight. The next morning, the task force does show up. The rest of the men get saved, and the USS Borie is still kind of barely half-ass floating above the waterline, and we can't leave that behind. So the USS Card sends up some dive bombers. They sink the USS Borie. Despite the loss of the USS Borie and some members of its crew, it is still seen as a tremendous victory and the turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic. For that, Commander Hutchins was awarded the Navy Cross.
Told you guys, I mean, that's the first battle you have to win. If the United States, it's the first battle you have to win for the Allied effort anymore. Not that the U.S. is going to be getting into this and going from Lend-Lease and now going to like full action. Actually goes cash and carry, and then you go Lend-Lease. And now, the U.S. are actually out here. Like, if this doesn't work, it's over. It is over. Russia's all alone. Britain, again, good luck if you can withstand another blitz. If the Germans are going to go after that again, everyone is screwed. So yeah, little moments like this have such a domino effect in the outcome of the war.
So in conclusion, that is the story of the USS Borie and her crew, the ship that helped usher in the end of German Wolfpack dominance in the Atlantic Ocean and usher in a new era of American hunter-killer groups. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch. Doesn't really work when I'm wearing a sling. Fluck will put it up on the camera. Thanks for watching.
Looks like you got hurt.
Bang, out.
Quack. Quack.
I know a million of you have already asked in the comments section already by this point in the video. I tore my pec doing jujitsu and had to have it repaired. So they basically like drill a hole through my bone and then
I didn't know you got hurt.
tendon, pull it through my bone and put a pin through it. And then my bone has to re-heal around my pec. So I'll be in this sling for like the next 6 weeks. It'll be a good time. Thanks for watching. See you guys.
I knew he's an instructor. That's crazy. All right, final thoughts. All right, incredible story told only like Nick the Fat Electrician can do. It's like he can take a few pages of an article or a Wikipedia page or a debriefing here and then turn it into a funny but engaging kind of story that can also give incredible amount of reverence and respect to those involved. And he does it better than anybody. All right, thank you guys for hanging out. Again, this original video is linked down below, so if you did not watch that first, please go over there, give the video a view, like, subscribe. And Nick, for watching this, best of luck on your healing process. We'll see y'all later.